performer is Ritu, who is a rising junior in high school, a self-described 2.5 linguist, and lingual, and she is thrilled to be doing stand-up comedy. Thank you for the introduction, Ritu. So, yes, you may be wondering, what is a 2.5 lingual? So let me answer that question. I speak English and Spanish, but my Hindi is not so great. When I was 8 years old, my parents put me in these Hindi classes, which is just what every 8-year-old wants to do after school, right? But the teachers really tried to make it fun and engaging, and they taught us these rhyming songs. Like there was one about if you take a fish out of water, it will die. Very wholesome. And I was so proud of knowing these songs as a little kid that we have all these videos of me singing these songs, and then at the start I'd be like, Namaste. So that's how you know it's legit. Like my grandparents would be so proud watching those videos. And in addition to the classes, there was even a summer camp, Jano India, and the last day of the camp, they would have this hit play in Hindi. And all of these kids had to memorize these lines, which you can imagine how hard it is to get little kids to memorize all of these lines in Hindi. And the thing is, a lot of kids didn't really know what they were saying, so it made it harder. And looking back, I mean, props to the parents who showed up to all the performances and cheered for their kids. Even if someone mispronounced something, someone just forgot all their lines, like the parents were there, proud of all of us. Like that's the best audience I've ever had. And but the thing is, during that phase of life, like when you're a kid like that, your parents tell you to do something and your first reaction is no. So eventually my parents they just kind of gave in. They were like, okay, fine, you don't have to keep learning Hindi. And I was okay with that until a few years later when my cousin Nikita introduced me to Bollywood movies. So if you're not familiar with Bollywood, it's like Hollywood, but 10 times the drama. The action scenes have got nothing on Mission Impossible has got nothing on the action scenes in Bollywood. Like all the sound effects, the camera angles, and the coordinated dance scenes in Bollywood are just like out of nowhere. Everyone on the street will just start dancing at the same time. So that's Bollywood for you. And the movie that we watched was Kal Ho Na Ho. Has anyone seen that movie? Yeah, we got a crowd that loves the movie. So if you haven't seen it, it's basically like the Indian The Fault in Our Stars. That's pretty much what it is. So something about watching that with my cousin and seeing that actor Shah Rukh Khan just say these lines, he's a very famous actor if you don't know, that made me want to pick up Hindi again. So I turned to Duolingo. Raise of hands, have people here used Duolingo to use it? Yeah, it's a pretty popular tool. Wait, so you all know that owl, right? The one that doesn't let you get any sleep until you've done your Duolingo practice for the day. And the thing about the owl and the streaks and the leaderboards is that you're so motivated for a few weeks to learn that new language. Like you're on like a high, you're just every day you're like, I'm learning, I can do this, I'm gonna get fluent. And then that kind of fizzles out. That's just the nature of the app. So that happened to Hindi, and that's pretty much the story of my Hindi. As for Spanish, I learned Spanish in school. And if you've ever tried to learn Spanish, you know that it can sometimes be really complicated and confusing to conjugate the verbs. Like there's different forms for like yo, nosotros, tú, él, ella, everything, and it's hard to keep that in mind. So in my school, we have something called verb checks, which is like you have, see my brother's already laughing. You have these two infinitives and you have to conjugate them for all the forms. And the benefit of that is that years later, now I know how to conjugate verbs really well. But the thing is, it stressed kids out so much. Like one of my friends came up to me and told me she was having nightmares where she was conjugating verbs. And I was like, that's when you know you need to stop studying. Another thing is, if you've ever started learning a language, you probably are familiar with the feeling where everyone around you is so excited for you and they expect so much of you. Like the first year after I had taken Spanish classes in school for only 1 year, and the summer after that, my family and I went to Spain. And everywhere we went, my parents were like, what did they say? Can you translate that into English? Oh, tell them that we want to go here in Spanish. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've only taken 1 year of classes. I know how to say the days of the week, months of the year, colors. I can conjugate 10 different verbs only in the present tense. So I was like, okay, you guys can't expect too much of me. But 4 years later, I consider myself a fluent Spanish speaker, and it's so amazing. I feel like you can use it in so many different opportunities. I even got to use Spanish in an Indian supermarket once. You'd be surprised, but there were women from a cathedral there, and they were looking for products, so I helped guide them to it. And then when we were at the checkout and they left and I'd helped them, I'd spoken to them in Spanish, the store clerk turned to my mom and he was like, so she speaks Spanish, but she doesn't speak Hindi. Which was kind of embarrassing, but it's like, I've made peace with it, Over the years, I felt like it's not that I have to be fluent in Hindi for me to feel valid as an Indian, right? You don't need to be fluent in a language to be a part of that culture. Like, I know I can walk into any Indian restaurant and I can order whatever I want off the menu. Like, I know what I want. I know what a masala dosa is. That makes me Indian. Yeah. And some funny things that's happened just knowing all these different languages is my grandmother, she doesn't speak very good English. So she'll speak to me in Hindi. And sometimes she tells me something in Hindi, and just like the story that we heard with Shardo, I replied to her like, oh, claro que sí. And then she was like really confused. She has no idea what I've said. But I think sometimes when my brain is like, okay, I just speak Hindi, it just goes language that's not English. And the closest thing is Spanish. So that happens, but at the end of the day, I've made peace with being 2.5 lingual. That's who I am, and I'm proud of it. So, thank you.